Hello, good afternoon, evening, good night, whatever time it is that you listen to these types of podcasts. Thanks for tuning in once again. I'm Bill O'Brien. I'm the host for the Lost Songs of Islands podcast. We're going to look in this episode a little bit about another balladeer from County Tipperary. I've mentioned him a few times. We've actually done a song from him back at the episode where I covered product placement in advertising. We covered a Darby Ryan song. It was Dwyer's Stout Ale. If you want to have a go back and listen to that one, or give it a listen if you haven't already. But yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about Darby Ryan. Now, Darby Ryan is a very, in his time, was a very big deal. He was a very popular balladeer songwriter. He has one song in particular that is still in circulation in singing groups and folk circles. Which is the Bansha peeler, or otherwise known as the peeler and the goat, which is fantastic. It's give it a listen. I'll play me singing it in a short while after I've done the introduction. It's essentially a narrative, a dialogue between a goat being arrested by two of the town police that are out trying to arrest the goat because they don't like the look of him and they want to deport him to Australia. Now, it's allegorical, obviously. The goat represents an Irish Catholic under penal laws, and the police represent the police under the British RIC, Royal Irish Constabulary, the peelers. More or less represent themselves in this story. The story behind it is that apparently in Bansha, which is a little town in Tipperary, small town just outside of Tipperary town, at the foot of the Glen of Ahalo, well, it's just up the road from the Glen of Ahalo, actually. It's right in the middle of it. Very beautiful area. Now, apparently back in penal law days, this probably would have been in the 1820s, 1830s-ish, I think this was written. Apparently there was a bit of a kerfuffle in Bansha town where a few patrolling peelers, a few RIC men, they thought they'd heard or found something in the road in the night time and sort of called out. Nothing happened, and they went to investigate, and it turned out to be a goat in the road. I'd imagine it was probably a bit of a non-story at the time, but small villages being small villages, the word of this grew and kind of picked up legs. Eventually, it was talk of the town that the police had arrested a goat. Darby Ryan heard about this and just immediately went off and wrote the song, the narrative of the story of some police arresting a goat. I'll sing it for you now anyway. This version is largely based around the version by Dick Hogan, which is on an album of his that you can take a look at, Songs of Tipperary. Anyway, here it is. Here's the peeler and the goat. As Bansha peelers went one night on duty a patrolling all, he met a goat upon the road and took him for being a stroller all. And with bayonets fixed they sallied forth and caught him by the whizzing all. And then they swore this mighty oath, I'll send you to New Zealand, oh. Well, now mercy, sirs, the goat replied, pray let me tell me story, oh. I am no rogue, nor ribbon man, nor croppy Whig, nor Tory, oh. I'm guilty not of any crime, of petty or high treason, oh. I'm badly wanted at this time, for this is the rotting season, oh. Well, it is in vain that you complain and give your tongue such bridle, oh. You're absent from your dwelling place, disorderly and idle, oh. And your hoary locks they'll not prevail, or your sublime oration, oh. You'll be transported by Peel's Act upon my information, oh. Well, no penal law did I transgress, by deed or combination, oh. I have no certain place of rest, no home or habitation, oh. But Bansha is my dwelling place, where I was bred and born, oh. And descended from an honest race, it's all the trade I've learned, oh. I will chastise your insolence and violent behaviour, oh. It's down to Cashel you'll be sent, where you will find no favour, oh. The magistrates will all consent to sign for your committal, oh. And it's there to Cork that you'll be sent for speedy transportation, oh. This parish and this neighbourhood are peaceable and tranquil, oh. There's no disturbance here, thank God, and long may it continue so. Your oath I don't regard a pin to get me my committal, oh. And me jury will be gentlemen and grant me an acquittal, oh. The consequence be what it will, appealer's power I'll let you know. I'll handcuff you in all events, and march you off to prison, oh. And sure, you rogue, you can't deny, before the judge and jury, oh. You're in possession of 2 pikes, and threatening me with fury, oh. I'll make no doubt that you are drunk with whiskey, rum, or brandy, oh. Or you would not have such gallant spunk, for to be so bold and manly, oh. You readily would let me pass, if I had money handy, oh. For to treat you to a pochine glass, 'tis then I'd be the dandy, oh. Okay, that was The Peeler and the Goat, or The Bansha Peeler, written by Darby Ryan. Okay, so just a little bit about the peelers being referred to in this song. So the peelers, you've probably heard of this term before. It's a slang word used even today to refer to the police. It's a bit old-fashioned. It comes from Robert Peel, who was an MP for the Irish rotten borough of Cashel at the time. He was charged with setting up a state police force in Ireland to essentially keep control of the indigenous Catholic population. Now, what he set up was the RIC, the Royal Irish Constabulary. Now, the RIC were the first ever state police force. Their explicit goal, their explicit purpose was to keep control of the Irish Catholics in Ireland who were being colonised at the time, and to enforce penal laws. Now, penal laws, which are also referred to in the song, was our Irish apartheid. Ireland had an apartheid system for over 100 years. There was a set of hundreds and hundreds of different laws that were all constructed around keeping the Irish down, the Irish Catholics down. Catholics, for example, couldn't hold jobs for the state. We were banned from singing certain songs. There was a lot of restrictions on what a Catholic could do, and this was generally aimed at removing Catholics from the economy, which very much led to subsistence farming among poor Catholic families, where estates and land holdings were continually broken down into smaller and smaller holdings, which over a few generations pretty much forced almost all Irish Catholics to be completely reliant on small patches of land, which is why we grew potatoes in the early 1800s. We absolutely relied on the potato crop because of the penal laws. So it was pretty much a separate set of laws across the whole country that kept the Irish Catholics down in almost every way you can imagine, and elevated the Protestant land ownership of the country that were largely British, English plantations, transferred power from the poor Catholic majority to the minority of powerful new landowners that had come over from England, claiming property at the time, and bringing in a specific set of highly unjust laws to benefit themselves and to aid in the colonial process. Now, this is very, very, very similar to what we are seeing today happen in modern-day Palestine, and for the past 75 years in the area that is historic Palestine. We can see today the effects of a colonizing force, a heavily militarized colonizing force, forcing indigenous people from their land, and bringing in apartheid sets of laws that those different groups have to abide by, that with the explicit intent of these laws being to dispossess indigenous people from their land and to make their lives as difficult as possible in favour of the colonizers. So there's a lot of very, very direct comparisons you can draw between Ireland under the penal laws and modern day Palestine, if you wish to do so. Now, Darby Ryan himself was no fan of the Peelers at his time, obviously, if he's writing satirical poems about them. He actually, it's reported that he actually spent some time in Clonmel jail as part of a protest. He took part in a protest against the Tithes Act in 1830, and subsequent to that, apparently the building that he was at a meeting at got raided, and he was hauled off and spent some time in Clonmel jail. Probably it was a month of hard labour that he got. That seemed to be the kind of standard first offence punishment that people were given around that time, based on what I've looked at. So when Darby had finished and written and started singing and printing The Peeler and the Goat, its reception was absolutely huge, not just in Ireland, but it very quickly started being sung in Australia and America and Canada and all over, everywhere that Irish people had emigrated to. It was immediately utilised as a protest song, sung outside courthouses whenever there was protests outside courthouses or against the RIC. It's a song that would have been sung to provoke them, and just or to kind of signal solidarity with some prisoner or someone in the courthouse at the time. But it was a very, very, very well-known song very, very quickly after it was written. It was involved. A lot of people were prosecuted for singing this song. You can kind of read between the lines there a little bit. It's not it's not likely that anyone prosecuted for singing the song was just strolling down the street singing a song with their hands in their pockets, kind of thing. There's almost certainly something else going on there. But under penal laws, it was possible to prosecute people for singing seditious songs, nationalistic songs, or it was to prosecute Irish Catholics for singing seditious and nationalistic songs. The Peeler and the Goat obviously is very seditious in its nature. It directly criticises the police force around people and the legal system as well, which is quite daring at the time, I will say. Darby Ryan signing his own name to a song like this was quite daring at the time for him. It's a surprise that he was never prosecuted. To me, it feels like the kind of seditious material that the RIC might want to clamp down on, that a judge might want to pull him in front of a court from, but I'm not sure that ever happened. It's reported as well that within a few decades of the song being published, it got very, very big in Australia in particular. I think the government of Australia actually petitioned a reward for a fabled missing final verse of the song, which did actually exist. A direct descendant of Darby Ryan supposedly claims the reward for this. So just a little bit about the kind of the life and times of Darby Ryan. He was born in probably 1777. His name was Darby Ryan, and grew up in a townland called Ashgrove, which is just outside the village of Bansha. Bansha lies in between the road between Clonmel and Tipperary town. It's very picturesque. It's a very small village. It's not really that much of note. It's as I said earlier, it's below the Glen of Aherlow, which is very, very impressive scenery. He was the second son of a farmer of the area, but from a very, very early age, it was very clear that he was far more interested in music and arts and literature than he was farming. And he was well known for his rhyming skills, even as a young boy. He attended a hedge school, which was the only form of education that was even available to a Catholic growing up at the time. And a hedge school was more or less exactly what it sounds. I've got a few songs about hedge schools. I'm thinking of doing specifically an episode just about hedge schools. But they were basically kind of half babysitting, half childminding services and half education services. You'd find travelling teachers, people that were literate, that might owned a few books, would set up schools literally in hedges, or little farmhouses, or hidden away from the road. There was no schoolhouses. There was no Catholic schools because this was illegal under penal laws, and you'd have these kind of impromptu schools set up that could literally just be a shack behind a hedge on the side of the road in the countryside. People would drop off their kids the 5 days a week. They'd pay the teacher to mind them for that time, and the teacher would cover basic subjects, usually English, Irish, some basic mathematics, and whatever the teacher knew, or whatever books he had, they'd cover. It was a very, very basic form of an education, but it was all there was, and they were very, very prevalent in the countryside in Ireland, very prevalent. And after finishing hedge school, he then went on to study at a seminary, where he was interested, for the most part, in languages, literature, poetry, this sorts of thing. His studies at the seminary were cut very short with the death of his brother. His brother died, and he was recalled to the family farm to take over the family farm. And this is not something I think Darby was very happy with at the time, and he pretty much stopped writing for a while at this stage of his life. But it wasn't long. It wasn't long at all after this until he started writing again. Darby Ryan was a very nationalistic man. You can tell this by all of his songs. He was clearly very, very nationalist. Now, for a lot of songwriters, it's very unclear as to their dedication to the Irish national movement, because you have to remember, a balladeer was an entertainer. They were writing and singing songs for an audience, to please or to entertain as a bigger audience as possible. So, and there's always a kind of a dynamic where if something's very, very popular within the population that you live in, and you're a writer, you're going to write about that particular subject. But it does seem that Darby Ryan was very serious. Like he went to jail. Like he spent time in prison for revolutionary activities. Came out of jail and very quickly started writing seditious material. Like and even from looking at the actual stuff that he writes, it shows a deep understanding. Like it's not just complaining about the situation. It's demonstrating an understanding of why the situation is the way that it is, and I think that kind of speaks a lot to Darby's attitude and understanding of British colonization. He clearly understood the process, and I think that's key to his songs. So the Peeler and the Goat in particular, the Bansha Peeler, the Peeler and the Goat, it seems more popular now these days as a jig. It's often thrown into sets in traditional Irish music, and the air to this song is unique. It was written to this song. I'll play a little snippet of the actual air played by an orchestra, because it's pretty catchy as well. And it's a tune. It's an air that has been used in a lot of other songs since. So probably Darby Ryan's greatest legacy is the tune to Peeler and the Goat. There's a lot of great Irish now traditional songs that were written and sung to it. An example would be The Recruiting Sergeant, that was played by Dominic Behan and also played by the Pogues on one of their studio albums. I forget which. Anyway, here is the air and the jig of the Peeler and the Goat. This is played by the Online Academy of Irish Music, and I took it from YouTube, from their YouTube page. And I'll give you the first verse with the music behind it. Why not? As Bansha peelers went one night on duty a patrolling, on they met a goat upon the road and took him for a stroll. With bayonets fixed they sallied forth and caught her by the waist, oh. Then they swore a mighty oath, I'll send you off to prison, oh. Oh mercy, sir, the goat replied, come let me tell me story. Oh, I am no rogue, no raven, and no crappie wig, nor Tory. Oh, I'm guilty of not any crime, but Patsy or high treason. Oh, the tide is wanting at this time, this is the rotting season. Oh. And this is just a quick snip of the same medley being used in the Pogues' Recruiting Sergeant.
As I was walking down the road, feeling fine and lucky, our recruiting sergeant came up to me, says he look fine and cocky, for the king is in need of men, I come read this proclamation now, a life in Flanders for you then would be a fine vacation now.
So Darby himself even saw the popularity of the air to the song. Doubtless there were lots of parodies written to the same air, as is the same as any popular song, particularly a political song. And much later on in his life, he wrote another song that was quite popular to the same air, which was called Ashgrove Old Bard, which I particularly like. It's one of my favourite Irish songs that I found since I've been digging around here. So I've been very excited to do this episode about Darby. This one, it's to the same air as the Peeler and the Goats, but this time, instead of a dialogue between police and a goat, it's a dialogue between the poet himself and death. And essentially, it's the old poet at the end of his life. Death approaches him and offers, and says it's your time to go. Darby Ryan replies to him, "No, Death, it's not. I've still got work to do. I'm a sworn United Irishman. I need to fight until my country is free." Death agrees to listen to his story. The poet Darby then describes the plight of Ireland under British colonialism. Says that his fight isn't over quite yet. Death considers his story and agrees with the poet that your people have suffered enough. You get to live another day. And I really like that idea. Especially particularly from someone. This would have been This would have been in the 1850s that he'd written this poem. So not essentially during the tail ends of the Great Hunger of Ungor, the Irish famine. Darby himself would have lived through the famine. Now, it doesn't seem to have affected him hugely. I think it seems that he was from a fairly well-to-do farm. I think he owned quite a large estate and possibly employed people for their farm. Darby wasn't a tenant farmer. He could afford to go away and learn. He could go away and learn at the seminary that he did. That wasn't something that typical tenant farmer children could do. So he was quite well off. But he obviously saw and witnessed firsthand, the same as anybody existing in the area at the time would have done, the horrors of Ungor. And I just really like the idea of him having a last dialogue with Death before convincing Death to let him live another day. So anyway, I did a quick recording of this, and this is Ashgrove, Old Bard. Ashgrove, old bard, the die has cast, your life to me surrender, oh. A security I will not take, if such to me you tender, oh. Your worldly priest did you prepare to pay the debt of nature, oh, which certainly is an inevitable fate to every human creature, oh. It's to your imperative decree I can have no objection, oh. But still there is no standing rule, except in monostipation, oh. For a few words I've to speak, I hope you'll not excuse me, oh. And as I don't wish for a long day, I hope you'll not refuse me, oh. Proceed at once and take your ease, to you I will now listen, oh. And if your case be just and fair, to it I'll pay attention, oh. Some instances I will relate, how our great population, oh, are treated worse than galley slaves, and struggling with starvation, oh. Some were basking in their ease of plenty about 10 years ago, though indignants had to emigrate to the Antipodian regions, oh. Victoria rashly sent her troops to wade in anti-Christian, oh, which was a grievous mortal wound to arbitrary Britain, oh. But now she's in want of Paddy's sons, but none of them he'll send her, oh. She said, although she was his queen, she's not his faith's defender, oh. Now let Prince Albert lay aside his sweet Cremolian fiddle, oh, his gridiron domestic sword, and sash around his middle, oh. Let him call them pious priests, a gang of surplus ruffians, oh. From Stockport mob of scavengers, now face the hardy Russians, oh. A sworn united Irishman, I'll pledge myself till dying, oh. My conduct, principles, and act, I'd scorn for to deny them, oh. If I was censured by some folk who were my persecutors, oh. Lord Edward, Emmett, Sampson, Gore, and Jackson were my tutors, oh. Now my recital I'll conclude with this glad consolation, oh, that my oppressors soon may rule their hatred to this nation, oh. This vital stage I'll soon must quit, as I am under seizure, oh. You may now act as you think fit, for your will shall be my pleasure, oh. With candour, honesty, and truth, you told me your short story, oh. You were oppressed, likewise misruled, by faithless Whig and Tory, oh. Your penal laws you were destroyed, without the slightest reason, oh. Farewell, old boy, I wish you joy, and live another season, oh. There you go. That was Ashgrove Old Bard by Darby Ryan, the Bard of Ashgrove. I really like that one. So Darby died after that. He died a fairly old man, and he was buried in Bansha Cemetery. His grave is still there. I actually went to go and visit it a few months ago while I was passing through Bansha to see if I could find it. It was fairly easy. In the old cemetery, just behind the wall, it is... there was, about a year ago, there was a ceremony there to celebrate the life of Darby Ryan, which I had no idea was on at the time, and if I did, I would have definitely attended. Something to note as well. He has a very strange headstone. Does Darby Ryan? It's an anchor. His headstone is a giant, I think, a granite carved anchor. It's quite light in colour, and there's not really any clear reason why, because he had no connection whatsoever to the sea. He wasn't a sailor or the son of a sailor. There was no sailors in his family or anything like that. He didn't really write sea ballads as such. So it's kind of a bit of a mystery why his gravestone is in the shape of an anchor. But yeah, it's there to be seen. It's just over the wall inside the old cemetery in Bansha, across from the pub. I'm going to wind up this episode here, and I'm definitely going to come back to Darby Ryan. In fact, what I'm going to do with this one is there's one poem in particular that I really, really want to share, but it's very long. It's an epic lamentation of almost the entire history of Ireland, since before even the Norman invasion, that Darby covers I think it's 60-something verses. It's very, very long, so I'd have to recite the whole thing, and that in itself could take 20 minutes, and there's a good few bits that could do with dissecting along the way between the beginning and the ends, because there's just so much packed into it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the Island's Laments by Darby Ryan as its own episode. I'll probably have that one uploaded in the next week or so, because it's easy enough to do. It's just one poem. I just have to sit down and actually read the whole thing, and I have absolutely no idea the air to it. But we'll deal with that one when it comes. There's a lot more I would like to cover with Darby Ryan as well, but I didn't want to cram it all into one really super long podcast episode. So the next one I'm going to do covering Darby is going to be just Island's Laments and a little discussion about all the eras of history that he touches, which could be quite lengthy in itself. And at some point after that, I'm going to come back to Darby and have another Darby Ryan episode, because he's got a lot of fantastic songs that he's written, and I don't think he gets the recognition that he deserves. There's only the only one anyone's ever heard of is The Peeler and the Goat, and there are dozens and dozens of really, really high quality ballads that came from this guy that I really would like to cover in a bit more detail. So I'm definitely going to come back to him. I'll also note that Darby also wrote in Irish. He wrote quite a few nationalist songs in the Irish language, which itself would have been very seditious at the time. Writing in Irish was I don't want to straight up say that writing in Irish was illegal, but it's something that could have got you in a lot of trouble or could have got you questioned very easily during penal law times. And I'd like to get an Irish speaker to sing a couple of the songs that I've collected from Darby that are in the Irish language, because I don't speak Irish myself really. I wouldn't do it any justice to try and sing in the language, so I'd like to get somebody else to do that. If anyone is a Gaeilgeoir out there interested in trying to figure out the tunes for a few songs and singing them and putting them out there, do get in touch. I am Bald Bill, BAULDBILL on Instagram. I've also got a Patreon, which is patreon.com /BaldBill. Or if you Google any of these things, Google Lost Songs of Ireland podcast, you'll find all these links. You know how the internet works. And yeah, thanks very, very much for tuning in to the Lost Songs of Ireland podcast. I hope you enjoyed a few tunes by Darby Ryan. There'll be plenty more coming, as I've got quite a few projects that I'm actively working on, kind of all at the same time at the moment. So uploads are going to be relatively sporadic for a while, but that's just how it is. It's kind of how my workflow works at the moment. But yeah, if you do enjoy what I do, don't hesitate to have a quick look on the Patreon, see if you feel like supporting me. It'd be fantastic. I'll be eternally grateful to anybody who does. I'm gonna add a lot more content to Patreon as well. I'm gonna focus on it a bit more over the next month or so. You're gonna get for any paid subscribers, are gonna get lyric sheets of anything that I've found, links to sources, as well as individual uploads of the songs that I'm recording and uploading too. So there'll be a lot more kind of actual direct sources that I'll be linking to through the Patreon. Just if anyone's interested in the history side of things, or just feels like you'd buy me a pint if you saw me out in the pub and I sang you a cool song. Anyway, I've been Bell Bill. This is the Lost Songs of Ireland podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll catch you again next time.